Well, good morning, church. Let's go ahead and get started this morning. If you will, go ahead and turn to 2 Corinthians chapter 8. 2 Corinthians chapter 8, we will pick up from here in a few moments. Before we get into our study this morning, let's look at our prayer list. Let's continue to remember Myra Henley and the rest of her family. Myra, I was able to go visit with her this week. Let's pray for her comfort, especially right now during this time. And let's pray for her family as they work with her, as they care for her, that they be comforted as well. They have the strength and the patience that they need. Betty Barrett, also within that family, let's be mindful of her. She is in the Aiken Hospital with AFib issues and has requested no visitors right now. Cindy Pack's surgery went well, so let's offer praise to God for that. But let's also ask for her recovery to go well. I think she's getting a cast on the 30th. Is that right? She's getting a cast on the 30th, and then that will be on for about 8 weeks. So let's be mindful of her. And then Cindy's cousin, Karen Harvey. There's no update on her treatment plan, but we still need to keep her in prayers. And Cindy's sister, Stephanie Jones, has a PET scan on October 2nd. So let's be mindful of her and the treatment plan and the results for that. Anybody else that we need to be mindful of this morning? Ted's cousin? Okay, so if you didn't hear that, Ted's cousin passed away last night. Is that right? Is that what you said last night? So let's be mindful of that family and the mourning over his cousin. Anybody else this morning? All right, George, if you don't mind.
Would you bow with me, please? Our Father and our God in heaven, we're so thankful for the Lord's Day that you've blessed us with, and we have this opportunity to be here today and the desires to learn your word and use it in our lives each and every day. And we appreciate your scriptures, and we thank you for the guide for our life. We thank you for all the blessings and things that you provide for us in our lives each and every day. And Father, at this time, we ask that you be with those mentioned on this prayer list, the ones that have serious illnesses, the ones that are recovering, and be especially with Ted's family and their loss. And be with us, Father, as we go through this study and on through life. In Christ's name we ask. Amen.
All right, we are in 2 Corinthians chapter 8. We finished at verses 1 through 5 last week, and we're going to kind of pick up there at verse 5 and just ask that summarizing question right there. What was Paul's purpose? Just this will be our review this morning. Chapters 1 through 7 is basically Paul talking about his ministry, defending his ministry, why he's able to celebrate. Now he turns his attention completely to something different. He's no longer on that subject anymore. He's talking about what's going on in Macedonia and what should be going on in Corinth. So what was Paul's purpose in verses 1 through 5 in talking about the Macedonians to the Corinthians? What does he bring up in verse 2? Is it verse 2? Verse 1. What does he bring up in verse 1? Now, we wish to make known to you what? The grace of God. So what does he mean by he's making known to them the grace of God? They know the grace of God. They're Christians, right? So what is this grace of God that he is making known to them in Corinth? He's talking about what's going on in Macedonia, right? That in a great ordeal of affliction, in their abundance of joy, their abundance of desire to help and assist, that even when they are poor, they are helping out, right? And we talked about what that grace of God is that he's talking about there. It is that even when they have nothing, they have a desire to work. There is a liberal desire to give within that congregation, to give what they don't have. And so Paul is using those Macedonians here in verses 1 through 5 as an example. Corinthians, there's a gift that all of you are participating in. Look at what the Macedonians are doing. Where's Paul writing this letter from? Macedonia. He's there. He sees their liberality. He sees their affliction, and he sees that they have an abundance of joy even in that affliction. That they have given so much more than he asked for them to give. And he's saying, look at what they are doing here. Right? And this is kind of a bridge into the rest of the passage here, looking at verses 6 through 15 and what we have entitled here as complete the work. Let's start in verse 6 and read on through verse 15. In citing that gift that Macedonia is participating in, he says, "So we urge Titus that as he had previously made a beginning, so he would also complete in you this gracious work as well. But just as you abound in everything, in faith and utterance and knowledge and in all earnestness, and in the love we inspired in you, see that you abound in this gracious work also. I am not speaking this as a command, but as proving through the earnestness of others the sincerity of your love also. For you know the grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, that though he was rich, yet for your sake he became poor, so that you through his poverty might become rich. I give my opinion in this matter, for this is to your advantage, who were the first to begin a year ago not only to do this, but also to desire to do it, but now finish doing it also, so that just as there was a readiness to desire it, so there may be also the completion of it by your ability. For if the readiness is present, it is acceptable according to what a person has, not according to what he does not have. For this is not for the ease of others and for your affliction, but by way of equality. At this present time, your abundance being a supply for their need, so that their abundance may also become a supply for your need, that there may be equality. As it is written, he who gathered much did not have too much, and he who gathered little had no lack. So why is it that Paul is emphasizing this grace of God given in Macedonia to these Corinthians? He's wanting to share their example. Look at what they're doing and be like them, right? That's essentially what he's saying here. Looking at verse 6, what did Paul urge Titus to do? What does Paul urge Titus to do in verse 6? To complete in you, Corinthians, this gracious work as well. Because of how the Macedonians responded to the opportunity, Paul urged Titus concerning the collection in Corinth. Essentially, get them as fired up for this opportunity as those in Macedonia. That he had previously made a beginning, maybe a clue that Titus was the one to take that first letter to Corinth. So he was there telling them of this opportunity to help those that are in that famine in Jerusalem. Verse 7, what did the Corinthians abound in? He says, in everything, and he gives you the list of nouns here, right? In faith and utterance, knowledge, all earnestness, and the love we inspired in you. And the first letter to the Corinthians in chapter 1, verse 5, he essentially says the same thing, that in everything you were enriched in him in all speech and all knowledge. And if you recall when we studied that, however long ago that was, the reference there is to the spiritual gifts that they had the ability to perform, to present. He says here that you have abounded. What does the word abound mean? You've grown, right? You have grown in all of these areas in faith, utterance, knowledge, earnestness. And I love that he uses the word earnestness here, because that was the whole point of what he said in chapter 7, right? That he was commending them for their earnest zeal to correct all of the problems. He says, you have abounded in all of these areas. You've abounded in love. As you have abounded in all of these things, see to it that you also abound in what? This grace, which is what? The giving like that of the Macedonians. Don't neglect this work. You have grown in all these other ways. Don't leave this work behind. This work still needs to be completed. You've grown in every other area. Continue to grow in this as well. And why is Paul telling them to abound in this gracious work? In verse 8. He clarifies this is not a command. They do not have to give liberally as the Macedonians had done. That would make their giving a compulsive response. But why is it that Paul tells them to abound in this gracious work? to show the sincerity of their love, right? He says, as proving through the earnestness of others the sincerity of your love also. He's telling them, prove the love that you have. He said, you've abounded in love, now prove it, right? Puts it on them that they prove it by being as earnest in their giving as the Macedonians had been. And if he commands them to grow in this grace, if he commands them to give beyond what they are able, this gift is not done in love. It becomes out of compulsion. So he clarifies that's not a command, but your love is proven through how you give. The Macedonians have given liberally, displaying their love. Now you do the same, heeding their example. Show your love by helping out those who need help. In verse 9, what example does Paul use to encourage them in this? This is the sacrifice of Jesus. He's saying, give so that others may not be poor anymore, right? Now remember, the whole backdrop here is that there is a famine that is coming to Jerusalem. And so that's why Paul and his crew are going to these other congregations, and they're basically saying, hey, we need to put a collection together because there's a famine that's going to happen in Jerusalem. That's the backdrop here. He says, give so that those who experience that famine have a little bit of an alleviation to that experience, right? That they are not overwhelmed by that. In comparison to that, he says, Jesus became poor so that you could become rich. Likewise, you, in a sense, become poor so that they become rich. That's not necessarily saying you do without so that they have everything. But with the example of Jesus, it's the idea of love, right? And that's why he uses such an example. Give liberally for those who need it, because that's exactly what Jesus did. You all are of Jesus. Love is the motive for liberal giving. Looking at verses 10 and 11. What is the Corinthians' advantage? What advantage do they have? Why is this to their advantage? Say again? You started this, right? You started this a year ago because they were the first ones to start the work. They started it a year ago. They started with a zeal for the work. It seems that maybe this desire at some point has dropped off, and that could be due to the false teachers that are there that are saying, oh, Paul really just wants the money for himself, right? They're sowing some of that distrust there, which seems to be why this would fit so well within this letter. It seems that they made a promise. Now they have to fulfill that promise. They made a pledge. They need to fulfill that pledge. You promised. Now see to it that you complete it. And if they were the first to start this gift, and it's less than the Macedonians who have nothing and are still giving liberally, how will that reflect on this congregation in Corinth? Not well. The Macedonians who have nothing, they are poor, they are being beaten, they are being taken out of their homes. If they are giving more than this Corinthian church, who Paul has talked glowingly about, that Macedonian church is going to start looking at that Corinthian church a little bit less than, right? I thought they had love. I thought this was supposed to be a congregation of the Lord's church, and we gave more than them. He said, this is to your advantage. It's simply best for them to complete this work that they've begun. Don't promise something and then not follow through with it. And while that is very direct to this situation, we see that point come up frequently through this letter. Remember in chapter 1, Paul talks about his integrity. He doesn't really have to defend himself because he knows he's right with God, right? We certainly must seek that integrity. Don't promise something and then not follow through with that thing. There was a readiness in Corinth for this work. There now needs to be a completion of that work in Corinth. Verse 12, what makes this gift acceptable to God?
Your desire to give it.
If the readiness is there, and that word readiness is the same as the word zeal. If you are zealous for this thing, essentially, I want to be part of the solution. Will this help? They had a readiness at one point. And he says that's what makes this gift acceptable to God. The Corinthians originally had that, but something has stopped them. Maybe we can relate in some way. Maybe we ask the question on Sunday morning when we're about to give, am I giving too much? Am I still going to be able to afford such and such? And what is such and such typically? Is it a need? Is it something you literally need in your home? Most of the time it's not. Most of the time it's a desire. Most of the time it's a pleasure. It's a want. That's an easy way to keep us from having that zeal in giving. We don't know exactly what it is that stopped them. We have assumptions. We have likelihoods of what stopped them. But we can relate in that way, can't we? To have a readiness to be part of a solution, but what does that mean for me? What will I now be at a loss of? Was that ever, by the indication of what Paul has given us of the Macedonians, was that ever a thought of the Macedonians? No, they gave more than they had. They were doing without so that they could give for those that were in this famine. If it's given according to what one has, he says, and not what one does not have. The Macedonians gave more than was expected because they gave according to what they didn't have. Now, what liberality, what love, what selflessness that these Macedonians had. Paul is now clarifying for these Corinthians that you don't have to have that liberality, but you need to have love and a desire to be a part of this gift. The bottom line here, there must be a willing mind and there must be a gift to match that willing mind. One must be conscious about what it is that they are giving. Looking at verses 13 through 15 here, why is it acceptable according to what a person has and not according to what a person does not have? Why is it acceptable according to what a person has and not according to what a person does not have? I think he gives us that answer in verses 13 through 15.
It has to do with the heart and not the pocketbook.
Sure, has to do with the heart, right? He first clarifies here in verse 13. This is not for the ease of others and for your affliction. Your gift is according to what you make. If you have $100, then your gift is going to be according to that $100 and what you give out of that $100, right? And he says it's according to what one has, not what one doesn't have. It's not meant for you to make life easier for others and then make life harder for you. It's not meant to put you at a loss. He clarifies here it's meant for equality. This is not a political equality, but God's desire that you in the church give to those in the church who are in need. Give what you can so that you are not at a loss and that they are not at a loss. And this makes it a lot easier when we understand that our money is a blessing from God, right? Our money is His money, and we are the ones that distribute that as He has so supplied it. George?
I was going to say the Corinthians were a wealthy group, and they had, even though the Macedonians gave out of almost to make themselves in worse shape, the Corinthians could give and make it equal to help the people in Jerusalem.
Yeah, they could probably make the exact same amount, put the exact same gift there, and they'd still be doing fine, right? He's saying it's not about how much you have, it's about what you're giving out of it and why you're giving out of it, right? And so he's encouraging them to be much like that, have that mentality, much like that of the Macedonians. Yes.
Both of them go to fill the need, though. I think that's his point, is both are there to fill the need, and the need is always bigger than all of us.
Right.
So God's gonna use every ounce of what's given, and my little bit might be, my little bit is just as important as your big bit.
Right. A good example, I think, is what we do with EEM. You know, the $5 per Bible. If you were only able to give $5 that day, hallelujah. Someone has a Bible now because you gave $5 that day, right? We are filling needs. He says he's talking about this equality. Now, why is this equality needed? Why is this equality needed? He's talking about equality that you give so that they are able to have, for the sake of equality. Why is this equality needed?
Because later when you have need, it will all balance itself out.
Right. If they give to those in Jerusalem right now, and they help supply their need, and later on in Corinth, they go through something, they go through a famine, you know what the Jerusalem Christians are going to think? They helped us. They helped us a lot. And that's what he's talking about with equality here.
I remember back a long time ago, we had a drought here, and our cattle were dying. And farmers from the Midwest shipped tractor trailer loads of hay here. And it wasn't 5 years later, they have a drought. And farmers from here said, we're sending it back.
There's a good lesson here of common human decency, right? But it's not just common human decency, it's godly decency, right? If we call ourselves godly people, this is the instructions on how to be a godly person in giving, right?
It's all about the heart.
Right.
You're not giving an expectation of receiving in return. You're giving of your heart, like you said.
Right.
And saying, you need this, I've got it here.
And this all goes back to what he said earlier, right? You have abounded in all these things. Now see to it that you abound in this gracious work also, that you abound in love. You have love. I know you have love. Now show that love through your giving. Now, does this mean that I am required to take care of the person that does not work? I don't think so. And 2 Thessalonians 3:8-12, nor did we eat anyone's bread without paying for it, but with labor and hardship we kept working night and day, so that we would not be a burden to any of you, not because we do not have the right to this, but in order to offer ourselves as a model for you, so that you would follow our example. For even when we were with you, we used to give you this order: if anyone is not willing to work, then he is not to eat either. For we hear that some among you are leading an undisciplined life, doing no work at all, but acting like busybodies. Now such persons we command and exhort in the Lord Jesus Christ to work in quiet fashion and eat their own bread. He wants us to give, right? God desires for us to give where we are able to give. If you can do good, do good. If there is a need, help supply for that need. But Christianity is not about mooching off of one another, right? I'm scared for those who would dare take advantage of the Lord's church. Those who could help themselves but choose not to. The situation in Jerusalem, that was not a situation where they could help themselves. They were going to be without. They had a very specific need, and this was a way for the church to help supply for that need. So in summary, and what we see in verses 6-15 here, take from the example of the Macedonians and finish putting together your gift with gracious and liberal giving. As you have grown in many ways, do not neglect growth in grace by being the very working hands of God. As you have pledged to help, do not become lazy and neglect your help. Do not worry about giving more than you have. Give what you can so that you may be a blessing to those who need you. Then, when you are in need, they will return the favor by grace. Before we move on to this next section, and starting in verse 16, any comments or questions?
This always goes back to, it always points back when it's talking about love, that love is not a feeling which we get confused about. Love always has to have action behind it for it to be true.
Love is a choice,
Yeah.
right?
Action.
Right. I'm going to do this. I'm going to participate in this, right? They had two actions to participate in. One, the action of giving. Two, the action of loving, right? And that's what he is encouraging them
And I don't
to
think
participate
we can
in.
separate it.
Right.
Can't separate it.
Right. Any other comments or questions before we move on? All right, let's go ahead and move on to verses 16 through the beginning of chapter 9. Chapters 8 and 9 go together wholly. It's unfortunate, again, that we have a chapter break where we do, because it seems that this is he's on one subject here, and that's that Paul is sending messengers. Let's start in verse 16, and we'll read through the 5th verse of chapter 9. But thanks be to God who puts the same earnestness on your behalf in the heart of Titus. For he not only accepted our appeal, but being himself very earnest, he has gone to you of his own accord. We have sent along with him the brother whose fame in the things of the gospel has spread through all the churches. And not only this, but he has also been appointed by the churches to travel with us in this gracious work, which is being administered by us for the glory of the Lord himself, and to show our readiness, taking precautions so that no one will discredit us in our administration of this generous gift. For we have regard for what is honorable, not only in the sight of the Lord, but also in the sight of men. We have sent with them our brother, whom we have often tested and found diligent in many things, but now even more diligent because of his great confidence in you. As for Titus, he is my partner and fellow worker among you. As for our brethren, they are messengers of the churches, a glory to Christ. Therefore, openly before the churches, show them the proof of your love and of our reason for boasting about you. For it is superfluous for me to write to you about this ministry to the saints. For I know your readiness, of which I boast about you to the Macedonians, namely, that Achaia has been prepared since last year, and your zeal has stirred up most of them. But I have sent the brethren in order that our boasting about you may not be made empty in this case, so that, as I was saying, you may be prepared. Otherwise, if any Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared, we, not to speak of you, will be put to shame by this confidence. So I thought it necessary to urge the brethren that they would go on ahead to you and arrange beforehand your previously promised bountiful gift, so that the same would be ready as a bountiful gift and not affected by covetousness. Again, it's very unfortunate that we have a chapter break there. This completes his thought, doesn't it? Let's look at verse 16 there. What does Paul thank God for? That Titus has what? He has this earnestness. He has this desire on your behalf. The same earnestness as who? As Paul. He's thanking God that Titus cares about this congregation as much as Paul does. He's thanking God that Titus cares about them. Verse 17, how is this earnestness displayed? Right. Not only that he accepted our appeal, but being himself very earnest, he has gone to you of his own accord. If you'll remember when we looked at chapter 7 last week, there's speculation and there's reason for it that Titus may have been a little hesitant to go to Corinth originally. And Paul may have had to talk up the Corinthian church to him to convince him to go. He goes, he comes back, he meets with Paul, and now he doesn't need to be convinced to go. He's going of his own accord. That literally means of his own free will. He is desiring to go. He has a heart for these Corinthians. He has a heart for this work that is going on in Corinth, and he wants to be part of that solution. Verses 18 and 19, who is traveling with Titus? Somebody. Now, what's his resume look like? A brother whose fame in the things of the gospel has spread through all the churches. What does that sound like? I'm not asking for a specific person. Like, what does this person sound like? If you read that about as a letter of recommendation about somebody, what do you hear? Sure. He's certainly exemplifying Christ. He is known very well, right? This is a man who is known very well, a brother whose fame in the things of the gospel is spread through all the churches. He and his work are known very well through all of that region, right? He doesn't share his name here, but there's a lot of speculation on who this might be, and the traditional thought is that this is Luke. And the suggestion is that the work in the gospel alludes to his writing. Now, that's simply just conjecture. But whoever this person is, it's someone who has traveled with Paul. It is someone that has worked in the churches, that has spread the gospel, and that everybody in that region would know. And since Luke's name, or whoever's name it is tied to this group, they're perfectly fine with them coming and getting this money. He's citing someone here who the church knows very well, who the church is very thoughtful of. We see here, appointed by the churches to travel with Paul in this gracious work. And so it seems that the churches, whenever Paul is going around and basically asking for money, they send along whoever this person is, and basically to help make people not feel so bad about giving money to Paul for this collection of the saints. So there's quite a few theories out there, but the one that has stuck the most is is Luke. Looking at verses 19 through 21, what was the benefit of having this additional person as part of the collection? I basically just gave this one away. What was the benefit of having this additional person as part of the collection? Well known, that no one will discredit us in our administration of this generous gift. How popular was Paul really within that region, within the church? He was known, right? He even, it's in this letter, he even goes on to describe who is typically chasing him out of places. It's Jews and Gentiles. Is Paul very well liked? In that time, he's not. Even within the church, he's not very popular. In the sense that people would trust him, he's saying here that we're sending this person along so that no one will think less of us with this gift. So that you all will have peace of mind that this gift is actually going to where it's supposed to go. For we have regard for what is honorable, not only in the sight of the Lord, but also in the sight of men. We want to do what's right, he says. If this is what gains the trust of the church concerning this gift, then we are on board. Lesson for us today, we may be of high integrity. We may be above reproach in something. Our integrity may be intact with God. And we may want to add on to the end of that, well, other people can't judge me. They can't pass judgment on what I'm doing or what they think I'm doing. Only God can judge me. Sure, there may be truth to that, but they're still going to judge you, right? They're still going to judge Paul. Paul was perfectly trustworthy with that money, but Paul acknowledges the truth. These people don't trust me, so we're going to send someone that they will trust, right? So that they are seen in their integrity by God and also by these people. Don't give others a reason to judge wrong about you. Verse 22. What do we know about this third person that is sent? Again, we're not looking for a name. There's a lot of speculation, but we're not necessarily looking for who individually this is. But what kind of resume does he give for this person? This is someone who has worked with Paul. This is someone who has been tested. This is someone who has a zeal for the work of the Lord. He has helped in sharing the gospel. He's zealous for the gift that the Corinthians are putting together. He's going because of his confidence in the Corinthians. Say it again? Diligent. This is a man that is working for God, is on fire for God, right? And he's being talked up by Paul as being a part of this envoy to go and get this gift. What a resume. The people in Corinth, there may be two groups there. There's a majority of Corinthians there that he's already acknowledged that love him, that have a zeal for him. They hear Paul talk up this person. That's a good letter of recommendation, isn't it? Paul is vouching for you. He's got himself a good resume as he's being highly regarded by Paul going into this setting. So Paul is sending these three on ahead. What are the Corinthians to do before the churches? Verses 23 and 24. This verse is a little confusing. These verses are a little confusing. What are the Corinthians to do before the churches? Right, show proof of your love and our reason for boasting about you. He uses the word them here. Who is them? Is them the churches, or is them the messengers? Who has the NIV? Who's turned there in the NIV? Can you read that passage for us, please?
Which verse?
Verses 23 and 24. Now, who does it sound like the love is supposed to be shown to? The workers. Sounds like it's being shown to the workers, right? Who has the ESV? Can you read the same passage there, 23 and 24?
As for Titus, he is my partner and fellow
So who is the love sound like it's supposed to be shown to there? Sounds like it's supposed to go to the churches. So there's a little bit of an anomaly here. Who is this love supposed to be shown to, right? They're supposed to show proof of their love, but who is this proof being shown to? Well, if them refers to the messengers, then they are being told to treat these messengers well, right? That's not necessarily far-fetched, but it's not really necessary either. We know that they love Titus. We know that they love this well-known man that is coming. That's the whole reason that he's coming. Why would they need encouragement to treat them with love when Titus has just left from there and they show Titus such love? If them refers to the churches, then they are being told to complete the gift by their love. He commended them for having love because of their desire to put the gift together. In verse 8, he tells them to prove their love by completing the gift. This seems to contextually follow up what he says in verse 8. Prove to the other churches what we already know about you and what we boast about you for, that you are ready to be part of the solution. This displays your love. This love being shown to all of these churches. So it sounds very much to me like these men are coming in to help them to show that love so that the other churches who have heard about this gift in Corinth, that they are encouraged by such love. Looking at chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. Now, why is it superfluous for Paul? I love that word. It feels so fancy saying that word. Why is it superfluous for Paul to write to them about this ministry? What is this ministry? What's the ministry that he's referring to? Right. But what is that referring to? The collection, right? Why is it superfluous for Paul to write to them about this collection?
That's all they're talking about.
For I know your readiness, or zeal. Paul knows that they have a love and a zeal for the work. There's no need for him to try to convince them to participate in the work. He knows what desire they have. It's almost meaningless for him to keep talking about the need, because they know there's a need and they know that they can help alleviate that need. There's no reason for him to talk about that necessarily. But what is it that he's encouraging them to do? He's encouraging them to keep up with that zeal, right? That's the whole point of this. He's not trying to convince them, hey, there is a famine that's going on and you guys can help out. They know the need. They want to help alleviate that need. But how many of you have ever been so on fire for God and so on fire for doing a work in the church, and then after time you kind of fizzle out a little bit? That's happened to all of us, right? That seems to be similar to what's happening here. Remember that zeal that you had at the beginning. I know the readiness. I know the zeal you have. He's trying to convince them to have that zeal yet again. How confident, in verse 2, is Paul in their readiness? He's in Macedonia, and he's talking them up. And he's telling the Macedonians, man, I tell you what, those people in Achaia, they're prepared. They've been working on this since when? Since last year. He's talking up the Corinthians wherever he's going. He's also described their zeal. As he started off chapter 8 talking about the zeal of the Macedonians, imagine he's in Macedonia, essentially saying the same thing to them about what's going on in Corinth. And we see the evidence of what that resulted in, right? Macedonia hears what's going on in Corinth, and they're like, well, we've got to give as much as we possibly can give, right? And
Might it also be too, maybe I'll so many words, that they had just come out of the dark place, and he talks in 1 Corinthians about people knowing, and what is that saying about the Lord's church, and you need to not do that anymore? Could it also be that he's telling everyone else they've turned the corner?
It could be. Now, it seems that he's writing this letter almost as soon as he gets the report, right? So I don't know how much time he's necessarily had to go around and talk them up after hearing the report, right? This almost sounds like he's writing like, I knew you could do it, right? I knew all along that you guys could overcome. I knew all along that you had this zeal. And so he's already had that conversation, it sounds like, with the people in Macedonia.
Paul is really working to make sure that there's no excuse on any side of any coin or any facet that will undermine what God is doing.
Right.
Give your gift. God is working on that. He's got a need that he's willing to fulfill, and you're part of that need.
Right.
How great or big that is.
Right.
Oh, by the way, I'm sending people whom you trust to pick up this thing so that it is without excuse that, well, I don't know who these people are. I'm not giving them money because I don't know if they're going to go spend it on what they want to do.
Right.
They said this, but they're going to do that. That's gone. Oh, by the way, while these people are here, and you will see, just like you are credible, they are credible. And so when you have opportunity for somebody else to hear that you hear that from, make sure you tell them their credibility.
Right.
And then we have this one. So so that it is ready to go, that you're not like, last time, I wish I'd have known more. Or,
Right.
I got to get
Right.
this, and I needed to do that with my money. So all those excuses are now gone.
Right, right. It reminds me of Moses and God, right? Moses keeps giving off reason why he can't do it, and God's like, no, you can.
But then the other
Right.
flip side is like Moses and Joshua and the leaders that God put forth. God did extra special effort to make sure that all those Israelites knew who that God was that he put in charge.
That's right.
All that effort.
That's right.
I mean, there's example after example, even to the point that they're standing in front of the tent with the cloud, and everybody has to see that. Here's another example of that. There's no excuse for you not to participate.
Right, right. Yeah, I know you're ready. I know you can do it, right? Looking at verses 3 through 5, why is Paul sending these three messengers?
To be sure they are really ready.
In order that our boasting about you may not be made empty. It goes a lot to what Leslie just said. They had reason to talk up the Corinthians. Now there may be a reason for them to re-encourage these Corinthians. Paul issued the challenge, and they started the gift immediately and were thrilled to be part of that solution. But maybe they started to lose that fire for this work. Paul knows their potential. He knows what they've desired in the past. And so he's sending these three people, trustworthy men that they would trust, to be part of this gift and helping them get ready for this gift.
So this is a prophesied famine, correct?
Yes.
Or one that is now going on in Jerusalem.
Right.
And can you imagine sitting around with all those Israelites in Jerusalem, and this group of Christians show up and now have an abundance of everything?
Right.
What kind of attention is that going to get from God? Now, here's the need that we have to fulfill in order to show how great God is.
Right.
So if you're doing a great job, and they're doing a great job, then what kind of great job do you expect for everybody to see that God has done?
Right. He even gives the flip side to that, right? He says, otherwise, if any Macedonians come with me and find you unprepared, we, not to speak of you, will be put to shame by this confidence. Now, what's that mean? What's he saying?
You're going to have to slack if necessary.
Well, he's saying if you guys are not prepared, we're sending them so that they'll help you get prepared because I know you're ready to do it. But if you've become too lazy and we come to get this gift and it's less than the Macedonians' gift, what's that saying to the Macedonians? What's that saying to those in Jerusalem? It's going to say that our word isn't worth anything. And it's going to say that you all aren't ready to work for God. Right? I thought you said that they were excited about this work. How is it that they have given less than us? The Macedonians would be heartbroken to hear about that within the church, right? He's sending these messengers so that they would be prepared. They need to be prepared for when Paul comes. So these messengers are going to Corinth for the express purpose of making sure this gift is prepared for Paul to take on to Jerusalem. This seems to fulfill what Paul said back in chapter 8, verse 10, about it being to their advantage. He says, so that the same would be ready as a bountiful gift and not affected by covetousness. This is a promised bountiful gift, which sounds like what? Sounds like a pledge, right? They said, we're going to give maybe they gave an X amount of money that they said that they claimed an X amount of money that they were going to give. What we know is that they promised to give a bountiful gift. They were excited about it, but that excitement has seemingly died down. It's possible that this could have been a certain amount that was going to Corinth, but because maybe they've gotten lazy, maybe they've listened to these false teachers a little bit too much, maybe they're a little bit behind, and they've lost some of that zeal. The messengers are going to Corinth to help prevent this gift from suffering due to any covetousness. We don't need to have an image of bouncers that are coming in saying, "Where's my money?" These men are there to encourage the Corinthians. That is the purpose of these trustworthy men being there. They are going to encourage these Corinthians to have that same excitement that they had in the beginning. They're saving these Corinthians from sinning. They're saving these Corinthians from having a lower integrity. And Paul's not just trying to get them to give money. He's trying to prevent them from losing that zeal and losing that love and giving. He's trying to encourage them to love and to show that love. He knows how much this church can love. Now show that love in what you give. Show that love in this liberal giving. It's interesting to me. He's not once talked about the money that they actually have there in Corinth. You know, we can go through historical studies. We can try to understand what the financial status of people was back then, and they were doing pretty well, probably. You know, in that area, even members of the church were probably doing decently well. But we have no indication of just how well they were actually doing here. He doesn't say prove how much money you have by what you're giving, right? What does he tell them to prove? Prove your love in this gift, right? It's not about what the amount of money that they're giving, but the love that is behind it. Paul praises God for Titus' zeal for the Corinthians. Titus clearly wants to help the Corinthians complete this gift. Paul has sent with Titus 2 other men to help. One of those men is well known, respected, and trusted in the church. The other has proven himself diligent in the work. Paul requests of the Corinthians to show their love to the churches by completing this gift. Paul does not have to convince them of the work. They know the work. But he does need to convince them to have the same zeal that they had at the beginning. The messengers are coming there to help them to make sure that they live up to their promise. Any comments or questions before we wrap up this morning? All right, as always, thank you for your attention. We will finish chapter 9 next week.